Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'll pass, if I may, to the Democratic Services Officer to do the housekeeping.
Good evening. Please note that this meeting of the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point along Braidley Road under the flyover in the surface car park at the front of the building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And would you be kind enough to go through items 1 and 2?
Thank you, Chairman. So apologies this evening have been received from Councillor Milliel, Councillor Lewis Allison, Councillor Malcolm Davies, and the Vice Chair, Councillor Roberto Rocco. We have substitute members for this evening's meeting, Councillor Brooke for Councillor Earl, Councillor Farquhar for Councillor Allison, Councillor Filer for Councillor Rocco, but not in the capacity of Vice Chair, and Councillor Sarah Anderson for Councillor Davies, and Councillor Farr for Councillor Allen. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests on any item on the agenda? Yes, Councillor Brooke.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a financial one, but it's for transparency. I'm a board member of Performance Development Company, which features in the financial strategy which we're looking at tonight.
Thank you for that. It's duly noted. No others, so we'll move on to item 4, public issues. There are no petitions received today, but there are questions and public statements. Mr. Stephianos, you have a question, I understand. I'd like to come and ask it.
Good evening. So I have 2 questions for the leader. Question 1. Yesterday's much delayed finance report admits that the revised plan will have a direct impact on the level of services delivered by the council. Can he confirm which services would be impacted? And in particular, how will this reversal affect the delivery and staffing of children's and social care services?
Thank you. Leader, would you like to?
Thanks very much. Thank you for your question. The statement quoted of will have a direct impact on the level of services delivered by the council relates to the medium-term financial plan and the budget of the council, which adjusts service levels annually in line with any budget proposals. The details of any adjustment are normally set out as part of the annual February budget report, with any proposals which need consultation being worked through in advance to ensure we get the full year effect of the savings. As we have proven by record investment across children's and adult services over the last 2 years, supporting the most vulnerable in our community is the heart of this administration's agenda, and we will continue to prioritise that.
Thank you. Would you like to question?
With pleasure. The finance report also proposes a schedule of asset disposals to fund his transformation programme. This is hoped to raise somewhere between 26 to 46 million pounds. So which council assets is he planning to sell to raise this funding, and which sales does he expect to prioritise?
Thank you. The 7th of September Finance Update report to Cabinet agreed the following recommendation. Cabinet agrees to bring forward a capital receipt schedule for additional non-strategic asset sales that could be used as an alternative method of financing the council's transformation investment programme via the flexible use of capital receipts. This workstream is ongoing and the schedule will be brought forward in due course.
There are two statements from Mr. Gattrell, who's not attending this evening, and they'll be read out on his behalf. I beg your pardon, I'm jumping. We have questions from Mr. McHistory first.
Okay, good evening, committee. Got three questions for Councillor Mellor. I know he's behind me, so we'll go for the first question. Tonight's report should have been released to the public by minute to midnight on Friday, the 16th of September, under the provisions set out in Section 100B of the Local Government Act 1972. That deadline was missed, as was the deadline for two reports to last Tuesday's ONS meeting, as was the deadline for the SPV report for the 20th of July meeting, as was the deadline for the finance report for the 2nd of September meeting. These were all statutory deadlines. How can the government trust you to abide by a financial strategy when you are repeatedly breaking the law?
Thank you, Chair. The Local Government Act does require that the agenda and reports for meetings should be available for inspection 5 clear days before the date of the meeting. But nothing in this legislation, and I quote, requires copies of any agenda item or report to be open to inspection by the public until copies are available to members of the Council. Provided that the agenda and a description of the business to be heard at the meeting are published timelessly, the late publication of reports does not invalidate the meeting or make it unlawful. Late publication of reports in support of agenda items should be avoided, but with the pace of work ongoing in this report and a number of work streams ongoing, in particular modelling around the government's announcements during last week, it was sensible to prepare the report with as many of those changes as possible.
And your third question.
Shall I do the second question before the third question, Councillor?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, please do.
It is pertinent, actually. As the deadline for releasing tonight's report drew near, or perhaps even at an earlier stage in the proceedings, did you consider asking the Department for Levelling Up to defer the date when the report had to be submitted to them? That date, of course, was the 30th of September. If so, when did you approach the Department for Levelling Up about this, and what was their response?
Thank you. To confirm, the Chief Finance Officer of the Council met with representatives of DLUC on the 22nd of September 22. At this meeting, it was agreed that this report would demonstrate the significant progress the Council had made in balancing its 23-24 budget, and the fully balanced position would be presented to Cabinet on the 26th October 22.
Mr. McKinstry, your third question.
Okay. Third question. Did you seek or receive any advice from a legal officer on the ramifications of breaching the 1972 Act? If so, can you release that advice in full? Or if you'd rather I went down the freedom of information route, could you confirm when precisely you received the advice and from whom, as this would help narrow down the FOI request?
Yes, Leader.
Thank you. The decision to publish the financial update report on Monday was taken collectively by Cabinet and CMB at its meeting on the 22nd of September.
Now we have a statement from Mr. Gattrell regarding agenda item 5, and that's being read out for him by the Chief Executive, as he's not here this evening.
Thank you, Chair. So it's a statement from Mr. Gattrell, Financial Strategy Update Cabinet Report, headed Observations arising from accessible data in current absence of report on website and inadequate Freedom of Information Act response received 23/9/22. Being 31 days late and 1 working day prior to ICO's otherwise Section 54 caution of potential contempt of court. FOI request information factors in financial forecasts. Response states there is not a central collation of the rates applied due to the intricacies that exist. In the context of high cost inflation, no information given for inquiry as to latest CPI or other rates such as RPI used in forecasts, e.g. the MTFPs. And then the heading discounted cash flow DCF methods during high inflation. Equally concerning the response states, unlike large entities in central government, DCF techniques not used to evaluate financial viability of intended major schemes extending over future years, i.e. whether on net present values, DCF yield or other appropriate basis.
Thank you, Chief Executive. And I understand there's a second statement from Mr. Gattrell regarding agenda item 5.
Thanks, Chairman. I shall also read, thank you, and the heading is Financial Strategy Update Cabinet Report. Observations concerning the essential Treasury management of cash flow with particular regard to subsection 114 brackets 3 close brackets of the Local Government Finance Act 1988 and the availability of liquid resources for expenditure during the Council's severe financial constraints, absence of consolidated cash flow forecasts. Cash flow forecasts are essential to any organisation when assessing estimated future available liquid resources and the timing of achieving objectives and necessary discharging of liabilities, whether revenue or capital. Financial data, such as MTFPs and budget monitoring reports, are required on the appropriate accruals accounting basis for income and expenditure in arriving at, for example, annual deficits, i.e. they are not representative of cash flow requirements. An FOIA response earlier this year states projected cash flow statements are not prepared, although it is noted segmentally detailed but apparently unconsolidated Treasury Management Monitoring reports are periodically presented to Council meetings.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Mr. McKinstry, I understand you have a statement to read as well.
Okay, it's 2 statements actually, Councillor, which I'll just crack on with the first one. I'm astounded this administration can allow a vital report to breach a statutory deadline by 10 days. The breach lays this report wide open to legal challenge. An instructive case is Regina on the application of Joycey versus Northumberland County Council 2014, where Justice Cranston said, information must be published by the public authority in good time for members of the public to digest it and make intelligent representations. The same surely applies to committee members who've had 30 hours to study a make or break report for Cabinet tomorrow. It smacks of scrutiny being downgraded, which brings me to my second statement. Is that okay, Councillor Williams?
Yes, please do.
I'm just trying to find it. We know from Appendix A to tonight's papers that this council must undergo an external assurance review of its governance arrangements. I welcome this passionately, and I hope the assessors have access to the recent draft annual governance statement consultation, including my email to Head of Audit dated the 23rd of August, which spells out, in my view, everything that has gone wrong with BCP's governance lately. Overview and Scrutiny Board abolished, fewer scrutiny meetings, whips ubiquitous, the ruling party holding the casting votes. An external review would therefore be most timely, and I sincerely hope it would guide BCP's governance back towards a stabler footing. Thank you very much, committee.
Thank you, Mr. McKinstry. Item 5, Financial Strategy Update for the Cabinet Report. Leader, Councillor Mellor, understand that you have a paper that you want to propose to us.
Yeah, thank you, and delighted to be here. Can I, before I start, Chair, thank you and your committee for fitting in this date, extra date of scrutiny before we have our next Cabinet meeting. I'm also really pleased to report to committee some really good progress since the last paper. Just to refresh people's memory, as the report states, we had a £36 million MTFP gap for 23-24, and this paper and the work that's gone on in the ensuing month has moved that down to just over 16 million. And I really thank my Cabinet colleagues and all of CMB who have worked with us in terms of the work that's gone on to move that forward. Chair, I can also perfectly happily say that there's a strong expectation that we'll be able to balance the budget in the October paper. And as I mentioned in the last meeting, we've now got these papers as a standing agenda item on Cabinet until we get that budget balanced in October. So I look forward to sharing that report, and if you so wish, I'm more than happy to be at any scrutiny meetings you organise. I'll also I think we've got to set it in some context as well, Chair, in terms of what was our main course of our issue and the context that we're operating as an authority, and in fact all authorities are operating in. This is despite effectively a 25 million pressure in this year around cost of living, and a 30 million pressure next year in cost of living. And we've also really pleased to say we've moved forward in terms of the in-year position for this year, from a deficit position to we're projecting a 4.2 million positive outturn as we speak. So we're both in positive in this year, and we would have been positive in next year if it wasn't for the cost of living crisis. But that is real, and we've taken those assumptions strongly into our calculations, and we do need to address the situation put in front of us, as you'll see by the levels we've gone to in the paper. One other thing I'll just point out in terms of our ongoing financial position, Chair, we do have a £16 million gap we're working on, and have a number of work streams on which we look to close in the October report. Just to reflect that, by the time we have a full, we've closed that gap, it will actually display, if we can close that gap in full without one-off measures, a balanced MTFP position for the 5-year period, which is, certainly I'm sure many colleagues are used to seeing MTFPs that move forward, in the autumn to get balanced, but then to actually go and see that as potentially balanced across the 5-year period should put us in the strongest position. Certainly any council I've served on in my 12 years as a member has been. In terms of how we've done that, I think there's detail in terms of paragraph 27. So we have the work streams we've undertaken to improve. And I'll just reflect briefly before I close the questions, Chair, on where we go next and what the work streams are to come. So we started work on a number of levels, including with our health partners. So the new integrated care board and the integrated way we're working with health it looks to be working really positively. We've got a number of items where we're working with health, and over the next few weeks we look to be able to put those into more rigorous financial context, so I look forward to reporting on those. We're conducting a review of vacant posts. I think that would be useful to work out effectively where posts we have had that vacancy for a while, and also the high number of agency posts we've got. So that work stream should be reporting back to Cabinet and CMB this week and next, which should have material opportunities for us. In addition to that, we've got to complete the work in terms of fees and charges. And also there was significant support from the government last week, not least in terms of the energy guarantee, which for the businesses, which we're able to benefit from. But it's quite complicated in terms of how we've modelled our assumptions around the 55 million in 2 years cost of living pressures. But that work stream in itself should have an impact as well. And not least to say, this is a problem. Cost of living is a problem that the entirety of local government is feeling the pressure with. We hope, we expect, and we would certainly make representation that government will continue its fine support. It supported us excellently during the COVID pandemic. It supported us more recently, and the public more recently through the energy. The energy support that's gone through, and we're making representations and desperately across local government seeking further government support. So hopefully, if that is available, that would also improve our position. Chair, the plan now is to, over the next 2 weeks, to really work up some of those work streams, bring them to fruition. Then we will see where we are in terms of the wider budget context. Alongside that, we're also got a work stream looking at if there are any opportunities for some further service redesign, but we've done a great piece of work across cabinet. So the support from CMB has been fantastic and detailed, and we appreciate that. And now very much look forward to any scrutiny or questions or comments your committee might have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As before, I think we'll take questions from the floor, members of the panel, and then following that, when we're exhausted in the room, we'll go online and take any questions online. First question from Councillor Hedges.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions. One question, very standard one. The other one is a question which is more seeking clarity. Leaders already mentioned that around September at the moment, there's about a £16 million gap. It's a traditional time of year, I think, where councils start to see where the gaps are and how it's going to be closed and how it's starting to close. Do we have any guidance on what these gaps have been in previous years under BCP And the other question, which is more for clarity, under section 10, it's a review of leased buildings. Now that we've got an assets register for regeneration or opt-out options on these leased buildings, could you expand a little bit more on those properties and the financial implications which will help to close the gap? Thank you.
Councillor Mellor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Councillor Hedges, for your question. So I don't have the exact detail in front of me. I know the MTFP position at this time, similar time, 1st of October, when we became the administration 2 years ago, there was around about a £50 million budget gap. Around £30 million of that was, my belief, was in relation to COVID. And then the government were able to support the significant support on COVID, and then our changed financial strategy close that gap. Last year, Adam Richards will remember more than me, but it was probably in the region of about 10 million. So our gap now at 16.4 million at this time is a material gap to close. It's a serious gap to close. It's significantly better than the position we were in 2 years ago. And just to repeat, Chair, in terms of that context, so we've got £35 million in our assumptions for next year, which relate to the cost of living pressures, £16.4 million gap. So we would be in September significantly in surplus if we hadn't had the cost of living crisis, which we weren't aware of in year, and that's on top of £25 million we've reflected on this year. So I hope that gives Councillor Hedges some comfort. If I'm materially incorrect, I'm sure Adam Richards will come in. In terms of leased buildings, yeah, thank you, Councillor Hedges. It's an important point. Significant amount of work has gone on across our estate, certainly the last 2 years. We've commissioned a piece of work by Alison Young to support us through generating a really detailed asset register, and then we're looking to do an estate piece of work on that to work out where we've got opportunities to both use those assets for regeneration purposes, whether we've got some of those assets that might be non-strategic and we can release them. But your question was particularly, I think, around leased buildings. We've now successfully integrated our staff back into the Bournemouth Town Hall and this annex building, which has gone well. So we're now looking to release further of our estate, effectively, further of our leased buildings, which should have a benefit for, again, of capital receipt potential, or a regeneration benefit, or just purely the savings in terms of the cost of those buildings. So a strong detailed piece of work going on there, Chair and Councillor Hedges, and pleased to see we've been able to move that forward quite materially.
Thank you. Mr. Richards, I understand you want to come in.
Yeah, Chair, if I can just come in and maybe just add some clarification to the question that was posed. If I look back at the October report that went to Cabinet last year, which is probably the most reference point to where we are this year, and a quick flick through that report, I think indicates that the funding gap for the year to come was just over £25 million. The thing we do have to remember, however, that when we look at our medium-term financial plan, the difference between this year and last year is the transformation programme and how is that being funded. And at this moment in time, we're assuming we will be given a capitalisation direction for 22-23 to fund that £20 million. And then in the following 2 years, we're assuming asset sales within the current plan will be generated to actually offset that. So there is a fundamental difference there. There's also a fundamental difference with regards to the level of available reserves that we've got in order to potentially fund any financial issues coming forward. And so that just needs to bear in mind that sometimes we can be in danger of comparing apples and pears by just looking at bottom lines.
Councillor Mellor, you want to come back?
Just ever so briefly, Chair, and thank you, Adam, for that update. The 10.1 million I was referring to, actually, I've just checked my notes, and it was in the June update report, so over 15 months ago. So hopefully that gives some clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Farquhar, I understand you've got a question.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me just open by thanking the questions and statements from members of the public who are closely following, on behalf of our residents, the financial difficulties that we find ourselves in, and that sort of interaction from the public from me for one is very much appreciated, because the outcome in the next few months is going to affect absolutely every single resident within the BCP conurbation. That's 400,000 men, women and children. So I was hoping, Chair, that we wouldn't hear a party political broadcast from Councillor Mellor once again, especially after the last special meeting that we had, where my colleague, Councillor Iyengar, seemed to draw out from Councillor Mellor that he would modify the nature of how he replies to questions. I say this because it is regrettable that Councillor Mellor goes back to the 1st of October 2020, when his Conservative administration took control after a vote of no confidence following the death of a UA councillor. And I say it's regretful because once again we hear the term in the region of 50 million deficit, hole, gap, whatever you want to actually term it. Councillor Mellor actually asked, he hoped that Adam Richards would correct if materially incorrect. Can I ask through the chair that Mr. Richards does actually correct, as he did in the last meeting, that 50 million gap or shortfall that Councillor Mellor refers to when his administration took control on the 1st of October 2020.
Mr. Richards.
You're testing my memory time and time again. If I remember correctly, and I stand to be corrected, but the gross gap on the June report, that was the last report before there was a change of administration, was showing a £52 million worth of gross pressures within that financial year. That was reduced by £22 million of government funding to a net £30 million. And then that £30 million, there was a strategy put in place that was setting out how the administration at the time would then fund that £30 million should further government support not come forward, and that took it down to zero. Clearly what then happened later in the year is that the government did step into that space and give additional financial support, but that should.
Thank you, Mr. Richards.
Thank you, Chair. May I have a follow-up to that? And my grateful thanks, Chair, to Mr. Richards for actually clarifying the reality of the situation, and also bringing to the table the fact that government support at that time was forthcoming, as they actually promised that they would do, that spend what you need to protect your people, protect your residents and get through COVID. So government came good at that time, and they came good at that time under a UA administration. So I appreciate that the strategy was such that it brought that shortfall down to zero, and then the government actually came through. My question, my follow-on question, Chair, because I know you're anxious to get on with the meeting and allow others to speak. How confident is the leader, based upon the fact that we've had repeated letters from ministers and the secretaries of state, that the support that was given to the administration, the UA administration in 2020 to close that gap, even though the strategy was in place, was zero, as opposed to what it is just now, that they will actually come through on the agreement in principle from the Mr. Sully's MP's last letter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Delighted. Thank you for the question, Councillor Farquhar. 2 points I would make there. First of all, just correcting you slightly, so the government support actually came through in November and December, and so it wasn't government support under a UA administration. Not that it would have made any difference, because the government would have and did come good. So thank you very much for your thanks for the government. That's good in your position. The second point, Chair, I will make is that in relation to the work we've been doing with Deluxe, and the -2 decision from Paul Scully when he was in that minister. We really appreciate the work we've been doing with them, and I think I said in the last meeting that -2 decision was arrived at through the summer recess, with both our officers, Adam Richards and his team significantly responding and working on on an often daily basis with Greg Clark and Paul Scully's civil servants. So again, really happy to place on record my thanks for that. In terms of my confidence, in terms of this, yeah, I mean, I think we've been asked to, as a part of the process of, if we should decide to seek that 20 million capitalisation direction, move towards a balanced budget position to give them confidence in the 23-24 and long-term position. We're obviously making, really quite exceptional progress on that, and I know the discussions that Adam Richards has been having in particular, give us some confidence with, give DLAC some confidence that we're moving well into that. We will look, throughout this process to see whether, and in the next report, it's quite clear, we've got a work stream around capital receipts. I think it's only right. What we would like to do as administration is to move matters entirely into our own hands if we can. I think that's what government are asking us to do as well. So we will look really responsibly at that, and over the course of the next month, Chair, we will make that decision in terms of whether we're in a position, an improved enough position to go forward under our own steam and capital receipts, or whether we will look for a capitalisation direction. So Chair, we're confident. I'm really confident in our officers and the work that my cabinet has been doing on this matter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Iyengar.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to make just a quick comment, and then I've got a couple of questions, if I may, which I'll ask one after the other. Thank you. Just first of all, I'd like to echo from the questions, the residents' questions, and from my colleague, the release of the reports. And just, if there's anything extra I can add, or it may not be anything extra, is I, with many others, are determined to be constructive in this whole process going forward. And it's so hard. It's very, very hard indeed. A report like this, it's only a short report. It's a very dense report, and there are others like it. And to receive it just yesterday, and I do understand the circumstances around for which yourself and CEO may have not had any control, but to receive the report yesterday, have to digest it. And I know a number of residents who are keenly interested in this kind of thing and were eagerly reading it as well, and trying to muster up the right kind of insights and questions and constructive challenge. Goodness, it's hard. It's very, very hard indeed. So what is already a difficult process between formally the council, the members' officers and the government is being made even more difficult by the onward process with the council, its broader councillor set and the residents as well. And this is making it 10 times worse, I have to say. And please don't be surprised if therefore the mood around this is somewhat of some kind of anger and maybe some sort of, more sort of, acidic kind of conversation than otherwise we would have liked. But I'll just make that as a comment, please. But the release of the reports, because it's very, very important for this, that we try and hang together and mend this together. The first question, I'll come to the questions. Thank you, Chair. For the current year, we're in 2022-23, we have money from central government of £20 million, which is the so-called capitalisation direction. Does that solve our problem in this year?
Thank you, Leader.
That is it, directly in relation to transformation expenditure. We are currently expecting £20 million of transformation expenditure in this year. So the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Second question.
Okay, that does solve the problem then. So we have no, I'll just summarise. So we have no, in a sense, no pressures within this year left, okay, to resolve. Then the second question then.
If it would help to just clarify, so we've now moved to a position of having a £4.2 million projected surplus in year. So we're projecting, So in as long as we then deliver either a capitalisation, 20 million for transformation or capital receipts to that number, we won't incur any further pressure in terms of the budget in relation to transformation.
Okay, thank you. The second question then relates, of course, to the following year, to fiscal 2023-24. There's a few, well, I say a few bits to the question, but I'll put it all in one question. There's some items here, and Lee, you referred to paragraph 27, which has got a number of bullets of the kinds of things that are coming through. Now, against the backdrop of the cost of living crisis, is that I think it's being over dramatic to say the spectre here is really, really pretty awful, okay, as to what may be coming forward, both the cuts to services and the disposal of assets. And I'd like to just make reference to a few things in the papers, which for me are giving genuine, not manufactured, genuine concern or confusion in a way. First of all, the difference between the use of the word strategic and statutory. Okay. Now, statutory is a known thing, but there's something in the paper about services we don't need to do, which is usually referred to things above the statutory level. But then in another paragraph, there's the word strategic. Things which are not strategic will be either sold off or maybe reduced. Now, that's kind of circular, because let's give an example of libraries, for instance. Libraries, 90% of a library service is not strategic. It's certainly not, well, it's certainly not statutory anyway. And for instance, this needs landing with some real examples, which is what is it that we're talking about here? Because a paper is going to government on Friday from Cabinet, if I understand right, that's the 30th, with maybe more specifics than are listed in paragraph 27. So when we think of all sorts of things like bin collections, we think of street cleaning, we think of libraries, we think of parks maintenance, we think of seafront beaches, various other things. I just wonder to what level the paper is being expressed, therefore what decisions are being made under the broad heading of strategic, statutory, and so on. Thank you. I may come back on the response, but thank you. That's my question, Chair.
Councillor Mellor.
I believe Alan Richards would like to go first. That's okay, Chairman, and I'll respond after that.
Mr. Richards.
Like to. A lot in that question, just to maybe pull out a couple of points in response. First of all, you mentioned that libraries aren't a statutory service. Libraries are a statutory service.
Part of it is a statutory
service.
service.
That's what I mean, to a certain minimum level,
Yes,
and that does need to be recognised as part of that process. And then probably another point I wanted to raise was the fact that I think in the answer to one of the questions that was asked leading into this debate, the situation with regards to DLUG is we provided them already with a copy of the report going to Cabinet, and they have acknowledged through the conversation I had with them on the 22nd of September that we will send them a copy of the October report, and that October report, because it being fundamentally based on the end of September position, will be the report that is the formal response to their end of September deadline that they set us. So it's not this report, this is an interim report, it's the next report that will be the formal response to whether or not we've been able to balance the budget for 23-24 that will go to Cabinet in October, and they've acknowledged that as part of the conversation that I've had with them.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And just to, I have nothing further to add to that. Just to confirm, that the numbers in this paper, the delivery down to 16.4 million has no material, as far as I'm aware, no material impact on the library service at all. Which actually gives you some context again in terms of saying, there is, not every part of the library service is statutory, and we can get to that number without doing that. So I hope that gives you some comfort.
And you've got another question?
No, so please, if I may please, I may have been partly guilty by mentioning libraries, but actually I was putting that out just as an example. Maybe I've sort of fixated responders on libraries, is that my question was really calling for, do we kind of, for instance, what is strategic and non-strategic? That was kind of the nub of my question, because it actually leaves it completely open. It's in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? What is strategic, non-strategic? There's everything here to worry about what is intending to be cut as a service or disposed of as an asset under that general banner of strategic or non-strategic, and therefore what will be detailed in the paper going shortly, as Mr. Richards has just said. Can you shed any more light about what will be going forward?
Yeah, thank you very much. Happy to. Just to clarify, any asset disposal will not have an impact on the MTFP because the asset disposal is a capital item, and we look forward for them to fund the transformation programme or the capitalisation direction. So I hope that gives some comfort in terms of assets. In terms of strategic, what we're doing is it's been a really detailed process, Cabinet and CMB. Working a couple of times a week in the first instance and now weekly as we're looking through all of it. And then, there's a really good summary, I believe, in paragraph 27, A to K, looking at different work streams, the main work streams we're doing. So you'll get a sense of, through paragraph 27, what we're doing. What we're having to look at as well is, some options for, moving services and reprioritising them differently. There is no, I think that in the context of the fact that there is, and I appreciate you've got we've gone into a library discussion, but to give you decent sense there, this does not at this point get to services like libraries, which we're really passionate about maintaining and keeping. So through the next couple of weeks, we will be firming up effectively. We've got a number of options in front of us. And I've said we've got a number of work streams to actually to conclude, which will all have positive impacts. And we repeat, we really do believe, that the government will and should support local authorities. So the context of the decisions we'll make from now, which we report in the October report, will be seen. The full detail of that will be in the February budget as well. At what point we'll be putting across our statements of what we're trying to achieve through that as well. So our strategy is here. We've got a financial summary strategy. I've said I'd want to report it monthly to Cabinet, which I'm really glad we've had the opportunity to pick up here. I hope that gives some comfort.
Thank you. Councillor Fowler, you've got a question.
Yes, I've got a couple of questions, and they're certainly not part of political broadcast in any way. They're genuine questions of things I don't understand. One of them is 27G. I've noted that down. It was the Winter Gardens and Cotlands Road, which says removal from the approved capital programme. Does that mean we're not going to be doing anything on the Winter Gardens and Cotlands Road developments, or does it mean something else?
Thank you very much, Councillor Fowler. So what it means, absolutely not. We're absolutely committed to delivering, regeneration scheme in terms of Winter Gardens and also Cotlands. So what we've done is we've asked. That's a massively strategic area for Bournemouth and BCP. So what we wanted to do, rather than just immediately go and transact the scheme that was in that had been achieved planning permission. What we wanted to do was to ask our Future Places team to review the site and see what the best thing to put there was. So effectively, until we have a clear plan of what actually is going to go there, it felt only right that to actually take out the planned expenditure on the existing scheme. So very much like what the changes to Futures Fund and Green Futures going forward, we will now be effectively, as and when councillors agreed a scheme, that's the point it will go in the budget. So we're committed to delivering regeneration. I think we've made that really clear. That massively does include Winter Gardens. It's just the fact that until we've got a clear scheme, but we are committed to delivering as an authority, it's prudent and sensible to take the MTFP implications out.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got another question, which is about what is the second homes premium? What does that mean?
Yeah, so thank you very much. Again, I relates to what's in the government's levelling up paper, which gives us the opportunity to charge an increased premium, an extra 100% maximum to second homeowners. At the moment, the MTFP is put on the basis of that being effectively that benefit in the MTFP. There has been some discussion about whether the status of that paper and what would happen. So we would look forward to government and DLUX in particular giving us some updates on that. But it is the second home. And Adam Richards will come in and be more clear.
I'm not sure I'm going to be more clear, but just to emphasise the fact that I think it was the June MTFP update report picked up on the proposal within the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, as the leader has pointed out, and that went to Council in July. Council confirmed that commitment to introduce the 100% premium on second homes and increasing the empty home premium, to 100% from 1 year, from what was previously 2 years, reducing it to 1 year, and that was endorsed by Council in July, subject to a review, I think, when the actual final details of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill are announced.
Chairman, just before I ask my next question, I don't know if I'm in order or not, but Mr. McKinstry was taking photos of me speaking on his phone, and I'm not comfortable with that at all. So would you mind, I don't want that to be circulated. I haven't given permission for it, and I would rather it weren't done. Understood, and you don't look old enough to have been there in 1984. And my last question is a bit more challenging, I think, and that's to do with greener, cleaner and safer. Well, I think most people would agree the town is definitely greener because there's so many weeds growing all over the place. Can you explain, can you enlighten us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely happy to. I think we were really proud to, in our last budget, to put significant investment, really material investment across the whole cleaner, greener, safer agenda. We've achieved some real successes with that. We had a much improved year in terms of unauthorised encampments. Which is across the cleaner, greener, safer thing. We've increased our CSAS community support officers significantly, and that's had a really positive impact. We're getting really good feedback from the bids that's been there. We have had significant investment across our teams in environment, which would be activating and delivering on those problems. We have some issues in terms of recruitment. I think it's fair to say it's quite. Most people will be aware it's very difficult in this environment to recruit staff, so that we've been affected a little bit by that. But our commitment across cleaner, greener, safer is there. We're doing significant work with the homeless community. We're doing significant work in terms of the impact of belongings and fly tipping across the conurbation being left in town centres, or fly tipping more generally. So I do believe we've made a really material impact on it, and I'm really proud of that. We would love to be able to go further, and it's a flag here as well. There are a number of vacancies. We're having a look at some vacant posts, but if people in this environment would like work, or would like to come back to work from retirement, then there are a number of vacancies at BCP. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. It's in reference to the staff cost basis, page 7, number 12. You say that with agency staff, other than in support of statutory services and delivery of transformation, no new agency costs to be incurred. And then following that, it says no agency cost to be incurred regardless of the service in respect of business support posts. Can you just clarify exactly what you mean by business support posts? And I'm just a little bit worried about, if we're not going to be using agency staff, what impact this will have on the staff that are already there, and any impact on the services that you are referring to in business support posts.
Councillor Mellor.
Yeah, I'll expand that just slightly if I can. So effectively, we do have significant amount of agency staff across the council. A lot of agency staff, is really well needed, particularly across children's social care, adult social care, effectively, and that is not what we're talking about here. We are having a review of agency, and we're trying to work out how we can move more people onto permanent contracts, which is both better cost base for the council, but also should provide long-term service delivery. So there is a work stream around agency, which I think is right and proper to be doing, but it is, but we will still be having a number of agency staff, because it's only right and expected that we would do. Certain posts really tend to call for it. In terms of your specific question about business support posts, so an example, and I'm sure any of my colleagues will expand. For instance, the PA, the Personal Support Network across the authority, we currently have a number of agency costs in that. We're moving out of that. So that's effectively what I am aware of as in terms of business support. But if that's not a full enough example, our colleagues will carry on.
Chair, if I might just come in and just maybe add a little bit more to that, in the sense that as part of the transformation programme that the council had, we were looking to significantly reduce the need for business support across the council, and that requirement that we don't incur any from the end of December links into the council's transformation programme and the attempts to reduce business support activity and requirement across the council.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I just wondered, because I am aware that we've had lots of problems with planning and we've had a lot of agency staff with that. So are we going to continue to have agency staff so that the planning service can continue?
Yeah, so as I started, right at the start of the meeting, we have a really important work stream around vacancy and agency staff. So we're absolutely trying to reduce our reliance on agency staff. There are certain areas where we keep, where we will need some. Planning service has done a good job of improvement. We're really pleased with how that's going. So we're not going to immediately rip out all of our agency staff, but we are looking to move towards a more permanent workforce across the organisation.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got 3 or 4 questions. First one, by raiding every possible reserve fund, half of the budget deficit has been closed, but there's still about £16 million left, as we've heard. That can be found by so far unannounced service cuts over the next 6 months, and indeed scattered around in the report are vague references to that. For example, paragraph 4, second bullet point, asks some particular departments to come up with mitigation strategies, so that's interesting. Anyway, there has, however, been rumours that instead of this, there is to be additional government assistance. Can the leader advise, as at today, how confident he is that this extra support will be forthcoming, as there is this deadline looming of this Friday?
Leader.
Yeah, hopefully we were clear between us in various answers earlier on. So the conversation with Deluxe has been that we will release we will keep an updated progress. We can have the detail behind this report, and we will also be publishing the report in October. So it's that we've agreed with Deluxe that their statement was that show us a process to getting to there. We've shown them a process, and that process will conclude with the October report. So that is a correspondence that is going to Deluxe. So that apologies if I wasn't clearer in saying that, but there isn't a 30th of September Friday report going to Deluxe. Was the question, are you confident government support? Yeah, so I am confident. The government has consistently, stepped up and been outstanding in terms of support over crisis. If we looked at the cost pressures we had through COVID, they were, I think actually, they were probably less effectively than we've had through cost of living. So we've got as this report clearly states, £55 million of costs in 2 years in terms of cost of living. But we saw what the government did and supported us in terms of that. And we'll make representations for us and across local government. The government continue to do that. That said, if you look at the position we're in now, it's £16 million gap to next year, which we've just heard was actually even less than we were in a gap last year. So, we're in a position where we need to try and support, but we need to be in a position to be responsible. That's why we've made significant progress from the 36 million we were started in the last report. And I want to be leading the council that conducts its business on its own terms. And that's why we're approaching this really responsibly and clearly trying to, manage our expenditure and our income to deliver a balanced budget. And I repeat, at that point, we will have a balanced budget for four, for the full 4 years remaining of the MTFP, which is a situation we've never had in the time I've been a councillor. One last comment, Councillor Andrews. Thank you for your questions, but I do disagree in relation to the fact that I think you've raided every reserve. That's absolutely not true. We've still got a 700k investment in this year's budget for our unearmarked reserves, as we've made a published decision in our last budget, where we will be not only getting them at the 5% reserve, but we're actually moving them up until I think it's the middle point across government. But for the next 5 years, we're putting in 700k a year in terms of unearmarked reserves, and we haven't touched anything like an unearmarked reserve in this report to get to that point. So apologies. Hope that's clarity gives you some comfort, and look forward to any further questions. Chair, thank you.
Yeah, well, this is sort of a follow-up question. Perhaps I should ask the Chief Executive, can he confirm that he shares this optimism? Can Mr Farrant say, as things stand today, when he contacts the government officer on Friday, Mr Scully's letter says he wants to hear by the end of September, not the end of October, that he can give the assurance that BCP can indeed balance the books?
Chief Exec.
Thank you, Chairman. I will certainly give them assurance we're moving in the right direction. I spoke to the Director of Finance at Dulux informally on Thursday of last week, I think it was, talked through the process. I've given them assurance of the progress that we've made, which was significant and is largely encapsulated in this report. So I can give them an assurance that we're moving in the right direction. Of course, I can't give them assurance that we have got there, because we cannot get there until the Cabinet makes decisions around the budget. So even at the end of this month, I cannot say these are the savings we are going to make, because those would require Cabinet or Council decisions. But I can say we're moving in the right direction, and that's the indication that I've given them. I've seen a major step forward in terms of the work that's been done, and as the leader has said, we now have around £18 million, I think is the figure, as a gap to keep filling. We know we've still got work to do, but we're going in the right direction, and that's the assurance I can give them.
Another question?
Another subject to some extent. There are references in the report to council tax increases, which haven't been taken full advantage of over the past 2 years. The leader has often said there's been a freeze on council tax, but obviously residents checking their bills see it differently. Again, it's a question for Mr Farrant. What is the actual factual position on council tax? Has there been a freeze on council tax over the past 2 years or not? I'm confused.
Do you want to answer that?
Sorry, what if we defer to the Section 151 officer to give the technical response, and I'm happy to add to that. Would that be acceptable to Council?
Far away.
Mr Richards.
Okay, so the technical response is in 21-22, so not this year, the year before, government allowed local authorities to increase their council tax by 1.99% plus the 3% social care precept. In that year, this council decided to harmonise its council tax based on the average for 2020-21. What we did is we increased the average by 1.55% and deferred the social care precept. In 22-23, government allowed us to increase council tax by 1.99 plus a 1% social care precept plus any deferred social care precept. We increased the council tax by 4%, being the 1% social care precept and the deferred social care precept. We did not increase it for the 1.99 basic increase. Hopefully that's a technical response to the question posed.
Chief Exec.
So I'm sure those are the figures that the Section 151 officer would have provided me for a response, if that's any help.
I've got one last question. In paragraph 28, that's on page 11, there's a reference to determining a list of assets to be sold. In my view, such a list should have been prepared by now. In fact, earlier on, one of the comments was made that, work is going to start on getting this list sorted out. Well, it is now urgent. Selling a property is not a quick thing to achieve. Can the leader himself say, in round millions,
how much needs to be raised in selling assets? Is it 10 million, 20 million or 40 million? And over what period are we talking about? And indeed, are any intended to be sold by the end of this financial year?
Leader.
Yeah, Chair, but very, very happy to. Thanks for the question. Just to say, actually, I think the urgency and what we were asked to do with DLAX after they've given us our Minor 2 letter was to address the MTFP, which we have materially moved forward in doing so and have a really clear plan about how we're going to address the rest of it. So that was the urgency. While that was happening, there's a work stream around capital receipts. That we've now literally, and I was speaking about that this morning in terms of how we're going to take that work stream forward. At that point, we're going to be in a better position to understand both in terms of the updated flexibility of capital receipts, also understand which our assets are non-core, and we look forward to reporting that back to this committee, cabinet, and council as we go forward. So, as to be quite clear, because we've massively invested further in a transformation programme, particularly around service-based transformation, so really trying to help the extra £20 million into our adults and children, our most vulnerable members of the community. That moves our overarching transformation expenditure to £76 million. We do need to collect over the next 3 years £76 million in a way of one of three ways, either through our revenue budget, funding that through capitalisation directions. The government gave us an indication it would be Minor 2 for this year, but they were unable until have further spending reviews to commit to future years, which makes it less of a compelling a case for us, but still very thankfully received. Or the third would be third mix of those of that 76 million would be sale of assets. So there's a significant amount of work to do. We've got a number of options open to us. I've been really clear and that we do not want to sell the majority of assets, and we're going to do everything we can not to do that. We believe that assets should be inherited for future generations and serve as key regeneration assets as well. So financial sustainability and regeneration. Where there are non-core assets that don't impact our long-term sustainability or our ability to regenerate, we look at them, and that work is progressing at pace now. Thank you.
I'm going to take second questions. Oh, sorry. Yes, Mr. Richards.
Chair, if I can just maybe come in probably on a slight technical point, but I think it might be worth just raising. When we talk about a capitalisation direction for this year of £20 million, that is net of £9.3 million in capital receipts that we're assuming we will deliver this year from asset sales. And those asset sales were set out in the budget report. There's a full list of them as part of that process. So I just don't want people to walk away with the assumption that we're not already committed to selling assets, because actually they were part of that process, and where we identified them, we've actually been working on a net with regards to that conversation with government.
Thank you. Councillor Bartlett, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've got about three questions. The first one, I'm afraid, sort of goes back over old ground a little bit. I'd just like to go to the current financial year, and because I sense there's a slight difference in approach here from Adam Richards versus the leader, and I think Adam said there was sort of an expectation that we would be taking advantage of the £20 million agreement in principle. But from the leader, I sense that that would not be the preferred option if we can find another way of doing it. My question, I think, around that is that whilst I understand the issue around raising money through the sale of assets, are there other ways from the revenue expenditure that we can actually look to reduce the amount that we would have to borrow in the current financial year? What direction are we really going in here? Are we looking to borrow the money, or are we looking to save it in other ways, or raise money through asset sales?
Yeah, thank you. It's a really valid question, and let's just be really clear. So we have applied to DLAX for a £76 million capitalisation direction. What they've come back, which is across 3 years, what they've come back with is said they're unable to do a 3 year, give us that comfort over 3 years. So they're minded to support us for this year. We've got £20 million, in this year's. So that's massively well received, and we're very grateful for that. And the MTFP is built on the basis of us achieving that. So that is, effectively what we're looking at doing. I think it's reasonable. It's quite clear message, certainly I've received from meeting Greg Clark when he was in post, and the work we've done with Deluxe is, they would like us to be able to be financially sufficient. And it's an exceptional financial support scheme, effectively. So we need to display to Deluxe that we are able to address certain parts of this ourselves. So by the October report, I have a very clear answer to that question. At the moment, we're very much minded to in terms of the capitalisation direction. If we get to a situation where we work on capital receipts, I would be mindful to move towards a capital receipt if we can do that at the pace we're required to do, because ultimately we should be not looking to government support. We should be standing on our own 2 feet, and that's what I'm trying to do, Councillor Bartlett.
Next question.
Thank you. The next one has already been touched on by Councillor Filer, and that's Cotlands Road and the Winter Gardens. Now, by taking them off the capital programme, what is the actual impact in terms of revenue expenditure? Does it reduce any revenue expenditure that we're not paying for borrowing, for example? Or is it really to give space within the existing Treasury borrowing limits to accept, in other words, take borrowing from a different place, but within the same Treasury limits that we have? I can't understand what the impact of taking them off the capital programme actually is.
Thank you. I will ask Adam Richards to come in terms of what the actual MTFP impact is, so I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me. But I can say, categorically, it never crossed my mind to remove them in terms of our Treasury limit. We've got a paper coming to the next meeting which looks to move that limit, because we believe we should be using our ability to acquire assets of future generations effectively and deliver regen. So I'm looking forward to move that, and I'll ask council support to move our Treasury limit forward when we next have the opportunity to be at full council. So what we are doing, and you'll see this in a number of items. I've mentioned Futures Fund, Green Futures Fund. We're going to put in the budget when we're actually clear and committed to actually the expenditure. I think I've said hopefully clearly earlier on, we're working through proposals and options around particularly the Winter Gardens. We will absolutely deliver a scheme on Winter Gardens when we know exactly what it is. Then that's the right time to reflect the cost of that in the MTFP. I do know it had a positive impact on our MTFP position, so we have taken out effectively borrowing costs in the MTFP. But Adam Richards will probably have the numbers available to him. Thank you,
Mr. Richards.
So just to explain, say the impact on the council's medium-term financial plan, and generally, as the leaders pointed out, with both those schemes, when council agreed to those schemes, it did so because actually it would have an overall long-term positive impact on our medium-term financial plan. When council agreed it, that was generally the position for both of those. However, within our medium-term financial plan, what we recognised is that actually we would be doing the capital investment to start with. That would come with interest and repayment costs, and then once you've built the asset, say if it's a PRS scheme, it would start generating net income. And so clearly there are timing issues. If you take it out of your medium-term financial plan, which I think is a realisation of the need to bring back a viable business case in the current climate anyway, you're taking out a pressure in the early years of your medium-term financial plan, but you're also taking out an income flow in latter years of your medium-term financial plan. So as Leader says, overall has a negative impact, but it does have a significant and welcome timing difference impact on that medium-term financial plan. Hopefully that helps answer the question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Just one last one, and it relates to future places and the funding of it. Now, when we looked at future places funding, we were sort of told it was going to be funded through Public Works Loan Board borrowing, and then I got an email suggesting that it might be funded internally through our own Treasury management system. Have we looked at that investment? Well, first of all, how is it being funded? Is it being funded through borrowing, or is it being funded internally? And if it's being funded internally, isn't that a very significant investment that could be held back for a while?
Yeah, thank you. So just to be clear, So there is, my understanding that it's been funded through was originally through PWB, so effectively debt. If latterly we've decided to actually not move effectively our treasury management around to not take debt specifically for that. That happens quite regularly across. So as we borrow at different points and different sums, not necessarily related to projects. One of the reasons we wanted to do that is we appreciate the assets at Future Places are working on a long-term asset. We should be able to capitalise the costs of working on those assets as and when they bring things forward. So the right way to address it in terms of the MTFP was to give them a working capital loan. So effectively, it's capital and not revenue. MTFP is revenue, so it hasn't got that impact on the MTFP. So by reducing it or changing it wouldn't impact on the MTFP, which is what we're trying to do now. I just actually, I'd like to just go slightly further because I think it's so important when we're in this situation where we're actually looking about long-term, financial sustainability. And Adam Richards has just said, quite clearly that investing in the winter gardens will have a positive long-term impact on our future MTFP. So it just speaks volumes to me that we need to remain ambitious about using our assets, using Future Places to deliver our assets and retain our assets, but allow us to be financially sustainable going forward. So to walk back from any commitment to Future Places, not that it would have any impact on the MTFP, absolutely isn't the right approach for me. We need to be, being really confident about those assets, bringing them forward, because that is what's going to deliver an exceptional financial sustainability for children's and future generations.
Thank you. Councillor Brooke.
Fine. Thank you, Chair. Just make 2 or 3 questions, if that's okay. Just make 1 or 2 comments in response to Councillor Mellor's reply to Councillor Andrews, where he was commenting on the reserves situation. 700k per year over 5 years will go nowhere near covering the higher needs deficit should we be faced with that. So a very, very high risk situation there. Over the last 2 years, to support the budget, £67 million was taken out of financial resilience reserves, and the 4.6 million surplus generated at the moment from this year's budget, again, will go nowhere near replacing that. So we are left with a significant financial risk through lack of reserves, and also a black hole in the budget as a result of the collapse of what has been described by the Minister, a dodgy deal, the beach huts. And if we take the start of this situation, then somewhere in the region of between 40 million and 54 million pounds deficit is significantly higher than the deficit at the equivalent time last year. So let's forget about only having 16 million deficit. What we actually have had created is a deficit that was significantly higher than that. So my first question, following on from that, is does the leader regret not taking the professional advice of the 151 officer that was set out in paragraph 157 of the budget report and the S25 report?
Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Absolutely, yeah, really pleased for that, and then repeat an answer I probably gave at the last meeting. Absolutely, remain unapologetic, in the extreme about our ambition to effectively not sell any of our assets. Effectively, the reason why the beach hut scheme was not able to be moved forward because effectively it was deemed that we weren't clearly selling our assets, which is exactly what we were trying to do. Is to effectively take a mortgage on an asset which we could deliver exceptional savings through transformation. So absolutely not. I'm also not apologetic about that we've doubled down on transformation and efficiency, because we believe in small state, low tax conservatism, and that's what we've been working really hard to deliver. I question the comment around the black hole, because there isn't a black hole in this budget in any way, shape or form, or any MTFP. We've got a £16 million gap we need to get through for next year. And we've heard earlier on this meeting from the Chief Financial Officer, we had a £20 million gap the year before and a much larger one the year before that. So, and I also question your numbers, because if you could potentially say we have a gap in terms of how we're going to fund the transformation piece, but that would be 16 plus 20 million, 36 million, which is not what none of the numbers you quoted. And in terms of the £20 million, we have a clear minded to direction from Minister Paul Scully, and we also have a clear strategy around an emerging strategy around capital receipts. So I do disagree. Where I do agree with you, Councillor Brooke, is your comment in relation to the high needs block. That is a really important thing for members and us as a council to be aware of. We currently do not receive from government sufficient amounts to effectively cover the costs of what they've asked us to do in terms of that cohort. This is a national problem. We have had numerous discussions with ministers and civil servants about it. We will continue to make representations about it. We expect there to be some form of national solution. That is by no means certain. We've got to be aware of that. We weren't one of the first authorities to go forward in terms of the pressure safety valve mechanism, where they took the most severely impacted authorities across the country. But we still have a very material impact. So you're right to raise it. It is an issue. We look to build our reserves. We look to manage our expenditure in there so that deficit doesn't grow, and we desperately look to government, as the whole of local government do, to provide a solution around this, because it really needs to be funded. This cohort needs to be funded. We are doing that, and we will continue to do that. But ultimately, we need a wider solution across local government.
I may just come back on that one before I go on to the next question. I'm glad you mentioned the safety valve, because clearly we were not in a financial situation that warranted us receiving the benefit a while back. Do you now think, and this could go to the leader and to to Adam as well, Mr. Richards, do you think that now we're in this current situation, we are now in a position where we could receive or should receive the safety valve?
Could you just clarify in terms of current situation? Do you mean in terms of where our high needs block is, or the budget more generally? Okay, so in terms of where the budget now is, I don't think we're in a particularly desperate situation at all. I think we absolutely were. We've moved forward to a position where we've got a £16 million gap, which is less than we had last year, and we've got material work streams that will address that, and we have confidence in the government will deliver some element of financial support as well. So actually, we're in a much better position than we were last year, and even on top of that, we're in a significantly better position, because once this gap is fixed by recurring means, not just one-off means, we will have a balanced financial position. So absolutely disagree with that. In terms of the mechanism and whether we would be of a scale to comply with that now, I think we're certainly one of the larger authorities. We have one of the larger deficits. So government are interested in our approach and our view on it, and we're making that representation. I know Councillor Broadhead in his national role also makes that representation regularly, as I've seen numerous of our officers, both with ministers and civil servants. So hopefully that addresses your question. Thank you.
Not at all. Sorry.
Can I just come in and just emphasise that regards to the accumulating deficit on the dedicated schools grant, this authority is part of something referred to as the delivering better value in SEND programme. So we are having regular conversations with organisations that have been or a programme that the government have set up to support local authorities in our circumstances. And as part of those conversations, there will be reference to, is the safety valve continuing? Is it ended? Is it appropriate going forward? What is the benefit of this delivering better value in SEND programme? What resources potentially the government can give us? And what material impacts can we have on that, snowballing effect of that accumulating deficit? So there is an active conversation taking place.
Fine. Thank you, Mr. Richards.
Chief Executive.
Thank you. Just wanted to put a bit more context around the deficit that we have and the scale of it and where we are. I think if they had been having those initial discussions now, then our deficit and our forecast future deficit would have been of the scale to put us in the safety valve. And that's nothing to do with the rest of the budget. That's all about the deficit on the high needs block. And there's no doubt in my mind that this was a government policy that was introduced with funding for local government, and the funding was nowhere near adequate for the scale of the challenge and demand. What we have seen, I believe, across the conurbation over the last, probably since BCP was formed, but I think that might have been coincidental rather than sort of causal, is an increasing demand where our demand has gone from below the national average up towards the national average, and the funding available does not cover the costs of providing the education, health and care plans for young people. There's no doubt about that, I don't think, in terms of any of the facts. What government has said is, it's issued this statutory disregard that said you can disregard that off your balance sheet. That's a very unusual accounting practice. Leaves the Section 151 officer scratching his head and wondering what on earth to do with it then, so it just hangs over here and grows because the funding we get from government is not enough to cover the cost of the service. And the government has said that you should not be funding it from your council tax. So, in a sense, there is no option. We are paying for the service, we are providing the service, it's a statutory requirement, and the debt is hanging off the side of the council's account. We are hopeful that government will extend the statutory override and disregard it, until it comes up with a solution. The solution that came up through the safety valve from many other councils was part government funding and part local authority funding through negotiation. And that part differed depending on how good they were at negotiating. We need to have a solution. That solution will come in over the next, I suspect, over the next 2 or 3 years. It is of a significant scale. I do not see how the government can put it on the council's books in its entirety. I do not see government yet saying it's on our books in its entirety. So we have to get to a solution. But I want to say that because the context, I think sometimes we get it out of context. It is a government policy that has had a huge impact, has improved many, many young people's education and the support they get, but comes at a price.
Councillor Brooke, you've got another question.
Well, can I just respond to the comments that have been made? Thank you very much for the clarifications there. Councillor Mellor did say that he was absolutely confident that we were going to get the 20 million from the government. He told us he was absolutely confident that we were going to get the what is now the dodgy deal through. He told us that at full council, time and time again. It was shown that the government never supported the programme. Similarly, some of the other reports that were supposedly supportive proved not to be. So I cannot accept this full confidence. He has misled council. He has been less than honest with the truth, and that was shown up at the last scrutiny as well. So please don't keep on coming back with that particular statement. No one can trust you.
Do you want to respond, Leader?
I don't believe there's a question.
I wasn't aware of one, no.
No.
My second question relates to the fact that the capitalisation of beach huts, which was described as a non-traditional method of bringing in receipts to the council, has been pulled from the budget. We all know that. And in the budget reports and the S25 report as well, there is an acknowledgement that the council could generate significant additional revenue receipts from new commercial models, that's in the plural. We have seen the removal of one which was mentioned to us in the budget, and that's the capitalisation of beach huts. Can I ask, because I'm rather concerned that there might possibly be some rather nasty rabbits being pulled out of the commercial, the proverbial hat, that there are no other significant additional revenue receipts coming from new commercial models. Is there anything in the background, in draft papers or anything else that could surprise us in the future?
Councillor Mellor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And Adam Richards might want to comment on the back of that. I think what's been really important, both in terms of our relationship with DLAC and what we've been trying to do, is to respond to the messaging in the communication we've been given around traditional. And this process we've gone through, so in the entirety of every move from the 36 million to the 16 million in the papers today is what we would call traditional means. There is some commerciality in that, in terms of we're looking at now full cost recovery across some of our services. So rather than maybe having a less commercial response to how we will be selling some of our services, we're actually saying we need to actually make sure we are fully recovering our costs properly, for that. So we are being commercial. I think it's the right thing to do. It's part of the approach. Otherwise, if we weren't being commercial, we'd have to just cut a load of services, which we're not, minded to do. But just to give clarity in terms of what you're asking for in terms of papers, draft papers, whatever, not one thing that I think would be constituted as non-traditional has moved that gap down from 36 million to 16 million.
Thank you. Right, we're moving on.
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to confirm what the leader said. And I think it's very clear with regards to moving from £36.4 million down to £16.4 million as a forecast deficit for 23-24. Within that movement, there are no new commercial models that would be described as non-traditional. It's a standard better approach to look at finance as to how you move from one to the other.
Fine, thank you for that. And I assume that the commercial comments that you made about still commercial activities going on, what you're talking about there is increases in charges, rent, car parking, etc., etc., etc. Fine. My final question, which is to do with the comments that have been made about staffing and the use. You make a statement in the report that you want to bring at pace an apprenticeship scheme into operation. We had a scheme, it died. I've been told that there, certainly for the immediate and recent future, we have had no apprentices. So the question really is, why was the apprenticeship scheme allowed to die? And what will the difference be between the scheme that we did have and the one that is being introduced? Because my concerns are, if we are dealing with keeping a lot of staff vacancies open, not employing new vacancy staff, that there is a real risk that the apprentices coming in, if we build this scheme, could be used to fill the vacancy gaps, and that is not the purpose of apprenticeships. So could you clarify what the new scheme is going to be like, and who will be monitoring it, how will it be run? Because that is crucial to how the apprentices themselves are used.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll come in more generally, and I'm not going to. I can't comment on his previous schemes because I don't have personal knowledge of them. If anybody else would like to comment on that, then they're welcome to. In terms of why that's in the report, I think it's a reflection of a few things. We heard earlier, actually, with Councillor Filer's question about clean and green and safe. It's very difficult to recruit people. We know we have significant agency pressure across, children's and social care and adult social care. So the right way any organisation is to try and significantly grow your own. So we're saying we want to long-term future-proof our ability to not have to rely so heavily on agencies, to be better at filling vacancies by investing in at some massive pace and scale. I mean, massive pace and scale in terms of apprenticeship, because it's what we should do. That won't impact us now. Positively. I and my wife own and run a number of engineering businesses. We're very used to apprentices. It's an investment in the future. That's absolutely what we will be doing here. So but it's also about in this environment, in this cost of living crisis, about giving hope and optimism and opportunities to people, and that's what we want to do. We want to make a better life for the children and young people in this community, and I think we can do that. We can underpin the financial sustainability of the council by having a more resilient workforce that isn't run on agencies, and now's the time to do it effectively. That will be run by, that is being worked up by HR, our HR team, and it will come back through. We've got a lead member for Levelling Up and Skills, Toby Johnson, and he's doing an excellent job across that work stream, and I would like him to be and expect him to be involved across that work stream as it develops, but it's exactly the right thing to do.
Just very, very briefly, Chair. Yeah, I actually surprisingly agree with you on this in terms of the value of apprenticeships. What concerns me is the potential of staff shortages and having to divert staff to manage the apprentices and the apprenticeship programme. And there's a real risk that if it's not done properly, all they'll be used for is filling gaps, and that is not what the apprenticeship scheme is about. So it's just a fully agree with you.
Thank you. Councillor Farr, you got a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Regarding the key financial planning assumptions, it's noted an increased income via car parking as the economy continues to recover post-pandemic, with plans built into that for phased increases in fees and charges over the next 3 years. Considering this, are there plans to secure BCP-owned car parks across the conurbation as assets going forward? Thank you.
Peter.
I apologise, I just missed the last part of the question. In terms of, you saying we're going to sell car parks going forward? Or
I'm just asking, considering there are plans I'll start again. I'm simply asking, are there plans to secure the car parks across the conurbation as assets going forward?
Okay. Great.
I'm not suggesting anything.
Yeah, no, great. Sorry, I just dropped off that last bit, so I do apologise, Councillor Farr. So let's be clear in terms of car parking in the report. So we are saying we should be, we have a responsibility to pass on, sort of inflationary across our fees and charges. So we'd rather not be doing it, but it's the right thing to do to protect wider services. So that is in there in terms of car parking. We also, car parking has been quite really impacted by COVID. So effectively, people are using car parks differently. We've had really heavy use of our seafront car parks because staycation over the last couple of years, and we've become more and more popular as a destination, which is great. Hopefully the money we spent on terms of our summer response has been positive in drawing people in. But perversely, the town centre car parks are being used differently. So you've got a number of car parks where the income in town centres has gone down. Less people are going to offices less often, effectively. So what we've also asked to do is to, rather than just tweak the assumptions up and down by 10%, we've said, well, actually, can we have a review of car parking across the conurbation so we can rebudget effectively an MTFP review, so we can actually get more correct, better assumptions around car parks. We're, absolutely committed to maintaining, car parks in the standards that we've got them. There are certain which will over time become surplus, and we'll look to do something, with those. But ultimately, very, very, I think we really realise how important, access to car parking is across the conurbation.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, or is?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we've got Councillor Farquhar, Iyengar, and Edwards, and then I think we'll go online. Oh, and sorry, we have one from that floor as well. So, Councillor Farquhar.
Yes, I actually have 1, 2, 3 questions and a few follow-ups based upon the debate so far and Councillor Mellor's answers. The first one is an answer to a question from the floor as regards trying to understand the difference between key and strategic and essential staff. It revolved around planning and the fact that there was concern that we use a variety of agency staff to fulfil our planning shortfalls, as we are well aware. planning applications face lengthy delays and are being resolved by agency workers who don't live or work in the conurbation. The question specifically is, Councillor Mellor said we're planning, there wasn't a plan to not immediately rip out, I think he was referring to the agency staff and the work that they have done over the last few months. So my question is, for those people that are working in planning, for those people that are awaiting their planning applications, with all the delays that we've got, can we rely on the report where it says section 12, the second from last bullet point, no agency costs to be incurred regardless of the service in respect of business support posts from the end of December 2022. Can we take from that that these staff in planning will do the fully fleshed out report, my words, tomorrow, and that will actually follow, and that will go to DLUC after that cabinet meeting. The question I have is, will the members have access to that cabinet report, plus that's the not fleshed out one, the one that actually seems to be serving Mr. Paul Scully for his letter on the 2nd of September, is that we went on to say that the fuller report with the detail is going to DLUC after Cabinet on the 26th of October. The committee, this committee's meeting, no doubt to study or scrutinise that particular report, is on the 17th of October. Now, my calculations is that to have the 5 clear days, the 5 clear working days, is that that report must be completed by Friday the 7th of October so that it can actually be published, which is 7 clear days from this meeting. So my question is, to flesh out the bones of this particular report, to have the detail that's required by DLUC and to close the gap or not, and whether or not we will be asking, as indicated for the 20 million from government for this in-year gap. My question is, what assurance do we have from an officer, not the leader, because the leader has blocked these reports, he's blocked the report for this particular meeting, he has delayed it. What assurance that we will have from both the officers for the completion of the complete report to go to DLUC, and from the officer responsible that that report will be available in the 5 clear working days so that the members of this committee and the public can have access to it and view it. Because in answer to one of the questions from the public, Councillor Mellor used a loophole to say that it's not required for it to be visible to the public if it hasn't been made public, visible to the actual the members first. So that's the assurance that I want. 1, will that report be completed in the next 7 days? And 2, will that report be released full on Friday the 7th of October, which gives the required clear days required for this committee to scrutinise it, and the people who have spoken, and the residents that have spoken today, that didn't have that opportunity.
Councillor Mellor first.
Yeah, I'll come back first, a couple of points of clarification. Yeah, Councillor Farquhar said that it was my decision not to publish a report earlier than Monday. Actually, not true. It's, you know, I was quite clear in my answer. We had a Cabinet CMB meeting on Thursday and collectively agreed to that. So just to correct the record on that. Chair, what we're doing is we are working on the Cabinet deadline as in terms of the report. We welcome any extra scrutiny that might come about. out in then, but the report will be released in terms of the cabinet deadline. And just apologies for not being clear. A number of members keep mentioning the 30th of September as a date of reports going to DLUTs. I think Adam Richards and myself have both been really quite clear. There is no report going to DLUTs on the 30th of September. They've had this report. We've agreed a process with them how we're moving towards balancing the budget, and the report they will be receiving, but will deliver a balanced budget, will be the October report, Chair.
Thank you.
Second, Chair, may I have a follow-on?
No, can you let Mr. Richards speak?
Chair, just to add something to what the leader said, is that DLUC will not receive any other report than a report that goes to the cabinet of this council. So they've got already, as the leader said, because it's public, the report that's going to cabinet tomorrow. And with regards to the October report, they will be sent, a copy of that October report, when it is public as well. There is no other report.
Couldn't be clearer. Yes.
I think perhaps I wasn't clear enough, is that in my opening statement, is that I'm quite aware that Mr. Richards said that the full report would go to Cabinet on the 26th of October. I pointed out that is our meeting on the 17th of October, which we will be expecting to scrutinise that. By Councillor Mellor's reply and that of Mr. Richards, do we have an assurance that this committee will see that report on the 17th of October, and will that report on the 17th of October be published 5 clear days beforehand?
The monitoring officer wants to reply.
Thank you, Chairman. Today, my scrutiny officer has been in communication with the Chief Executive and other officers to talk around the scrutiny dates, because we realised that the dates were going to be at odds with the statutory timelines and the date for Cabinet. So a date for scrutiny hasn't yet been set. I know there's one in the calendar, but officers are looking to rearrange that scrutiny date to align it in order that the statutory deadlines can be met. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Iyengar.
Thank you. I'm aware there may be some overlap, so I will be brief. The criteria in this paper have been covered by a few people, as in the ways in which things have been sort of brought forward or pushed back in terms of, contenders for being cut and so on. I just wanted a general challenge on all of them, please, because what do I mean by this? Things like, for instance, the focus on agency staff, and I won't repeat them all, but the commitments in there about, okay, we want to, in general, move out the agency staff. As a view, for instance, I think rather than dogma, a pragmatic view on that is what's needed. Some of them will, for a considerable time, rely on agency staff, even though we may not want that as the long-term position. There's also a comment, for instance, about new commitments, no new commitments. Again, that's one that's open to challenge very much, because a new commitment, especially in the era of a cost of living crisis, could be actually much more critical to residents than something that's already in the pipeline in the council, and actually a substitution should happen. Third thing is procurement, and Leader, you will know this from our past working together. Unless I missed it, I didn't see one word in here about actually a focus on procurement. And for those out there, and there will be a few who think the council sometimes can be a soft touch when it comes to selling services to the council, maybe it's embedded in some areas in this. I just didn't quite see it brought out, and it ought to be, about how the council is looking at its procurement budget and how much it's spending, both the volume and the price, the sticker price that it's paying for its inputs. Another example is on service enhancements. There's something in here about no service enhancements where they cost. Well, one of them that's been a running sore for virtually every resident is about contacting the council, about not being able to get through. And I'd be especially dismayed if there's now a dogma about we will not be spending now any money on enhancing the customer contact. Maybe I'm mistaken, it wasn't meant like that, but please forgive me, that's what I gleaned from the report that we have just now. So to form a question from this is that, Leader or Chief Executive, please convince us in what way these criteria are representing sound judgment, which serves residents, and not dogma, please.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate the questions as well. Firstly, I'll agree in terms of the approach to agency staff very much. You know, we need to be pragmatic, not dogmatic. It's not a lurch and just saying we can't have agency staff. Absolutely not at all. We've got various opportunities and instances where agency staff are fundamental, and we will actually, just to go further than that, there will be some long-term, agency staff that will continue. Certain services like children's services, usually when I think that Cathy Hadley suggested more recently, around about 16% of agency is actually quite normal in some posts. So we're not moving away from agency entirely. We value our agency staff. We're just trying to ask our business managers, our senior officers to work out how we can make longer term investments in staff and bring people on more long term, and how we can also be a little bit more demanding about the criteria for moving agency staff into the organisation. You mentioned about no new commitments. Well, we've been quite clear on that in terms of no new commitments until the budget's balanced. So we're expecting at in the October report that benchmark will be achieved, unless in that interim period, you're quite right, and I've been quite clear on this. Let's not just cut things and stop things. We need to be, if we need to either invest or we need to deliver a service, we can do. So that's why we put into the previous report no new commitments unless signed off collectively by our Chief Financial Officer and myself in the finance portfolio category. So again, I agree with you that we can't just not have a complete cut to new commitments. You'll be pleased to know, and I know you've long made this argument, and you're quite right to do so, around procurement. There is £10 million of procurement savings in the transformation budget for next year. That work stream is really ramps up as from next financial year, and we have strong confidence from the work that's been going on that we'll be able to deliver that. And I think your last point was around customer services. So you'll know as well that we put an extra £1.5 million into customer services this year, which has vastly improved the service. It's not gone far enough. It's not got, because what we need to do is to transform the way we interact with residents and the back office systems that support that. That again is also happening at the early part of next year. So we've plugged the gap with that investment. Again, that's been a service that's been difficult to recruit to. So again, we come back to how can we grow our own better, and you can see how we really want to make a push on apprentices across the organisation. So I hope I've given you some positive comfort on each of those 4 bullet points you raised, which should ultimately give some comfort and context around the whole approach. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. My question on the dedicated school grants deficit's been answered.
Okay, that made it easy. Councillor Dedman, do you like to come to the table?
I'm sat in the wrong place, I apologise.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's on, yes, and thank you very much for letting me speak. I do appreciate it. It's on the pages which we've got, which I've read obviously with interest, and it's about an enabling council, strength-based approach, consider the extent to which the community would be better placed to manage council assets and the services delivered within them through volunteers and other sources of funding. Now, my question is on that, and I know I bore everybody stiff by saying I've been on a lot more councils than most of you. However, I'm sure I do, Councillor Filer. It's no good looking like that. On other councils I've been on, this has been tried and it's not been satisfactory. And I would be very, very reluctant to see BCP going down the same routes. Volunteers are all very well, but there is a lot of problems with using volunteers as in replacement for paid staff. And I think that would be very difficult. And my other question on that, I mean, I know that's not really a question, but the question would be, is the leader thinking that might extend to adult social care and health? Because I would be very reluctant to see that happening. Thank you, Chairman.
Leader.
Yeah, thank you very much. And look, I get the question, and I think I probably have a difference of opinion to you on it, really. So we've done quite a lot of work-based community development, which is where we can work out what's strong and what's wrong in communities. So we put a significant investment across our communities service. So we're able to go for this year in not just a 10%, most of the private communities, but 20%. So you know, and that's partly to do with we're trying to really push our, you know, get out into communities, work out what's there, and support them to deliver more. So get where we can get out of the way and where we can support them. I absolutely, you know, I'm sure you didn't mean this in terms of saying we can't rely on volunteers. I think your point was, you know, to take them away from paid staff, which was more the point. I get that. I do think that there are a number of instances where actual volunteers can provide a better service than we're able to do. I've often, you know, been an exponent of Parkrun as a public health initiative. If public health had to set Parkrun up, you know, we wouldn't have been able to do it in the way that Parkrun have. That's purely staffed by volunteers. There's a massive benefit. We've been introduced through the vice chairman of this council, this committee, normally to the Sea Cadets, you know, Paul Sea Cadets, and the work they do. If we can then, you know, they currently take 60 people, they've got a waiting list for another 60. If we can support those people, organisations like that to do more, we'll be providing better service, you know, to our children, and you know, so I actually believe we actually need to do more of this. I was in the first inaugural integrated care strategy meeting this morning across the whole care piece, and it was, you know, consistent through all of the speakers in that a widespread asset-based community development approach is absolutely what's right. That's what we mean by empowering. When communities can get on with stuff and do things, let them do it. And when we need to get out of the way of them, that's great. That's not going to mean, you know, we're not going to be here and responsible for providing services, but we're going to support communities to do it where they want to, where they can get benefit out of it, and where they can give benefit to their communities.
Thank you. Is there a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, that was very interesting. And the only other thing that I wanted to say, which has come out of the meeting tonight, really, is that the leader said at one point we must give hope and optimism to people in this cost of living crisis. But it seems from all of this paper that the administration intends to raise charges on so many things. And the leader also said at one point, oh, this is the right thing to do. Well, I'd like an explanation on that, because in the cost of living crisis, if I thought I was going to have to pay more for some of my services that I got, I would be even far less hopeful and optimistic. So I'd like some sort of explanation on how we explain that to the residents. Thank you.
Leader.
Yeah, absolutely, delighted to. So a couple of things in that. In terms of hope and optimism, I think by the end of October, you know, looking towards having a largely balanced 5-year medium-term financial plan that gives us, as councillors and as a community, genuine optimism about the long-term financial sustainability of this organisation. Why is that important? Because we need to protect the services we provide to residents, and we will be able to do that if we have a strong, sustainable financial position. In terms of fees and charges, I think it's important that those you know, inflationary pressures are adjusted in terms of the pricing. But there is an impact in that in terms of you know, that is, you know, across the board, people are having inflationary pressures. But why are we doing that? Because it's important for us not to be cutting services to our most vulnerable people, because we need to be delivering, you know, service to adults and children, and you know, in terms of, you know, making this place as attractive and popular as it is. And I'll just finish, Chair, if I can, by saying that's exactly why. Thank you very much for your comments. Because exactly why we've had the council tax strategy that we've done for the last 2 years, where we've already saved. There's £11 million in people's pockets that wasn't in people. It wouldn't have been people's pockets if we'd put council tax up to the maximum. That's going to go up again year and year and year, because that money will remain in people's pockets. And so that's exactly what we've done. And that, to me, to this Conservative administration, looks like exactly the right thing we should have been doing, because you know, right now people need to keep as much money as they can in their pockets, and that's why we're a small state, low tax administration.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would just like to comment that when the LGR started, of course, Christchurch was going to pay a huge amount more council tax, and we only got harmonisation through the Unity Alliance. But that's just a comment, Chairman. Thank you very much.
You also have a comment, Leader?
Yeah, I do have a comment, actually, because effectively the budget was in, which is the budget we did, which is effectively got harmonisation. So it's a Conservative budget, was supported by the Conservatives, not supported. I don't believe any Christchurch Independent voted for that budget, and I stand to be corrected, but certainly not all of them did. Additionally, I'm delighted in the last budget report we actually were able to say how much less council tax residents in Christchurch were paying than they were paying, would have been paying if they'd if they hadn't come in as part of BCP, and that was over £200 for each Band D property on average. So, so massive savings to Christchurch residents because of the BCP amalgamation, which is something that Councillor Detman has done historically and continues to suggest hasn't been good value for residents of Christchurch. I disagree.
Well, I don't suggest that, Chairman, but I did say that this was a longer term thing and it was the start of LGR, but I won't get into a discussion with the league.
I apologise to those people waiting online. Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate it, and I appreciate your indulgence. There was another question, and I did have a follow-up, but we'll skip over that. I am very curious to the last statement that Councillor Miller just made, that he saved £11 million in residents' pockets because he didn't put up council tax, or perceived as not putting up council tax, and that will go on year. Is that an undertaking? This is the first side question. Is that an undertaking by Councillor Miller that he will not put up council tax next year? Because I don't understand how you can actually have 11 million go up year on year unless you actually put the council tax in, unless it's some sort of mad idea that you saved 11 million, or so you say, in that year, and then that 11 million magically stays in the residents' pockets. But aside, my actual question is this, and this is one which I think we need an answer to. Is Councillor Miller under the impression that if he doesn't take this 20 million capital direction, that he will actually avoid the external governance assurance review?
Councillor Miller.
Two points, Jeff. Thank you very much. So just if I can help explain. So effectively, and Adam Richards will confirm this. So the decisions we've made to not put up council tax, to only put up to 1.55%, freeze it in Christchurch 2 years ago, to do a core council tax freeze last year, have been the equivalent of £11 million of council tax this authority hasn't collected, which means there's £11 million in our council tax pockets more. The point is about compound. It's a simple point. So we can't go back and then start charging that 2% again. So every year that figure will increase effectively. And if you're so like, I'll make sure that's in the next budget report so you can see that more clearly.
And if I may, Chair, the answer to the question, and just by way of repeating it, is Councillor Miller under the impression that if he does not take this £20 million capital adjustment, or whatever the financial term it is, bailout I call it, is he under the impression that he will avoid, or this local authority will avoid, an external governance assurance review?
Mr. Richards, you want to answer?
Chair, if I can just answer probably the previous question in this question, or elaborate on the previous question as well. In regards to the external governance and financial review, I spoke to the government, as I said, on the 22nd of September. They are still committed to doing that review as part of us making the formal application. There's been a slight delay in that review because government have been slightly preoccupied with the deaf and demonic, so it's put back by a couple of weeks, but they'll still be likely towards the end of October that they'll be undertaking both the finance and the governance review based on their current plans. With regards to the previous conversation, the budget report, as the leader set out, section 20 of the February 2022-23 budget report, goes into the level of detail to support what the leader says, and that statement provides a graph as to what our council tax would have been if we'd increased it in line with the maximum that we could have done, and what actually we did increase it by. Section 20 of that report indicates that the difference in 1 year, the leader's figure was over 2 years, in 1 year is £7.6 million per annum. And therefore, unless we were given the ability to correct that, and make that back up in any 1 year, then as the leader says, that is basically hard-coded into the position going forward. In fact, actually just growing slightly because of the differentials on the numbers, if you assume that the maximum council tax increase that we could have charged would have increased by, say, 2.99, and our council tax increased by 2.99, then actually you've always got that differential between the two.
Right, well, thank you everybody in the room for your contributions. I'd like to move online now, if I may. I've got 4 speakers, Councillors Cox, Hadley, Jude Butt and Councillor Phipps. So we'll start with Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman at work. So I'm afraid you haven't got my picture, which is probably a relief. I want to start really by congratulating Councillor Mellor. That was really a masterclass in smoke and mirrors, I'm afraid. We're not in this position just because of the cost of living crisis, but it's because of a failed dodgy deal, which he tried to do. The report that you have in front of you is not so much a financial strategy, as I call it. It's more of an incomplete and desperate incomplete financial recovery plan. And speaking of desperate, I think Councillor Mellor needs to make up his mind. In an answer to Councillor Brooke, he said that we're not in a desperate position, and yet twice, if he cares.
Councillor Cox, can I just ask, is there going to be a question?
Oh, there's a question. There's 3 questions actually, but he twice referred to be desperately seeking assistance. He's got to make up his mind which is it. So my first question really is actually just a clarification point to Mr. Richins, that he said he'd reported. He'd spoken to DLUC on the 22nd of September, and I believe he said he'd provided the report then. Can you just clarify that?
To confirm, Chair, no, I did not provide them with the report on the 22nd. If I implied that in my answer, then please forgive me. I actually sent them the link to the report today. I probably should have sent it yesterday when it was actually published, but I actually sent them the link this afternoon.
Could I ask therefore how he knows how well it was received? Has he spoken to them since they've reviewed that?
No, I haven't spoken to them since the report was issued. Clearly, when I spoke to them last week, I provided them the reassurance that we were making positive steps in the right direction, as outlined by the leader earlier tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richins. And this is a question really for Councillor Mellor, is that DLUC have been very clear that improving governance is a key part of what they're after, and therefore what efforts have been made to achieve this, and how does rejecting the suggestions of the overview and scrutiny at the last meeting look in that light? There's also, that's one question. Do you want me to?
Should we take one at a time?
Okay.
Councillor Mellor.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So effectively, one of the things I've on the cabinet agenda is a monthly report. We wouldn't be having this report if I hadn't done that, and we're in a scrutiny session now because of that. So I think that's shows strong commitment to the process and to governance. We have worked harder as a cabinet CMB team, and there were just some learnings in that which we will bring forward as well, which should help our processes. And ultimately we're really clear. We're in terms of the challenge we were faced with, £55 million in 2 years of cost of living, when we've only got a gap now of 16 million. So massively under pressure of cost of living, and we would be in an unheralded position if it wasn't for that cost of living pressure. So we've dealt with it. We are dealing with it. We're engaging with DLUC really responsibly and really maturely, and I look to build on that. Additionally, I know the leader and I have had conversations about governance, as well as we will have further conversations with the chair of audit and governance. So we're really mindful to take feedback. And work with whether it's DLUC or audit and governance or overview and scrutiny. But what we're also minded to do is to deliver a balanced budget, which we did last year. We had effectively a £15 million surplus, and we've got a £4 million surplus already for this year, and we've only got a £60 million gap for next year, and then we have a balanced budget and balanced MTFP for the full 5 years.
Thank you. Your next question, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, a question I think for Mr. Richards. The report that sets out is clearly a report where we've taken advantage of all the good news that it's happening in terms of saving costs and increasing income desperately. And actually, just as a side comment, you may be saving £7.5 or £11 million in council tax, but you're also taking it out of the residents' pockets by increasing the fees. But one question I did have was actually the risks involved in the current budget, because there are risks that were clearly identified in the Section 151 officers report in terms of the budget, and these were to do with the council tax base, for example, where we're increasing the council tax base by more than what is normal, and in the basis that we're heading, according to the Bank of England, into a recession. Is this not overly optimistic? So that's one particular risk that I would like him to comment on. And then the other one was really to do with the future places and the risks associated with the funding of future places, which can only be described as unusual and certainly not traditional in terms of the marketplace in general. If it is traditional, then why on earth can't we take that debt and sell it to the market and have done with it and let them trade on their own account? So those are two key risks as far as I'm concerned in terms of the current budget. One is to do with the council tax base and our recovery of council tax, and the other one is to do with the funding and the debt to do with future places. Thank you.
Councillor Mellor.
I believe that was directed at Adam Richards. I'm more than happy to respond to it, but I don't think that would be Councillor Cox would appreciate that.
Okay.
Chair, I'm going to respond to the council tax base, and the leader may have a comment or reflection in regards to BCP future places. With regards to tax base, within the report, I think I very clearly set out a number of those key assumptions, one of which is the council tax base and the assumption of a 1.2% increase in 23-24 and a 1.05% increase in 24-25, which compares to probably the pre-pandemic norm of about 0.5%. And the reason why we got this slightly higher rates is that actually we expect there to be a recovery from the rates that we're seeing during the pandemic period. Clearly, there are a number of risks within this medium-term financial plan, and the cost of living is another one, and we're going to have to keep it under constant review. The leaders have made a commitment to monthly updates, and clearly as part of those monthly updates, we're going to have to continue to challenge ourselves around the robustness of the estimates that are being used and prepared for this medium-term financial plan. Another good example of that will be the pay award, in the sense that the pay award at this moment in time for 23-24, we got 3%. We'll have to continually challenge ourselves as to whether that is a robust, realistic assumption for 23-24, and going forward, at the more normal 2%. With all of these assumptions, we're going to have to just continually to review them to make sure, positive and negative, that they are the most robust estimates for us to be able to then evidence and use as a basis for setting the budget for 23-24.
Councillor Cox, yes, okay, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll respond to the question in terms of future places. I think it is entirely traditional. Capital projects, capitally financed. I don't think there's anything unusual in that. We know other URCs are funded under the comparable principles, so I reject the assertion that it's non-traditional.
Thank you. Councillor Cox, is that all your questions?
Well, if it is traditional, presumably it can be funded elsewhere. They can go to the markets and get it funded that way, and not through the council.
Councillor Mellor, do you want to come back?
If Councillor Cox would like to take a position to the markets today in terms of selling debt, he'd be welcome to try that.
Right. Are you content, Councillor Cox? I move on now.
I very much doubt it, Mr. Chairman, but I'll give way.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. You got questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got three questions, if I may. The first one was around commercialisation, and it was discussed in terms of commercialisation of things like the beach huts, and clearly before there was a significant cost increase potentially for people renting beach huts. But the other example given was events, and I'm really concerned about that one because community events are very often held by people with very limited financial resources, very often working in their own time and trying to deal with all of the requirements, regulations that we put in place. And it was really interesting that for the Queen's Jubilee, we managed to cut all the red tape and make it really easy for street closures for parties, and there was a choice involved there to do that. So at the same time as under paragraph 14, we're talking about using volunteers increasingly to deliver services or support communities. And I sit somewhere, I guess, between Councillor Dedman and the leader in terms of there's some good stuff about community engagement, preferably facilitated, and that does take staff time in order to do that. So the question, I suppose, is what is in the mind of the Cabinet in terms of charging commercialisation of community events, please? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Councillor Dunlop would give a fuller answer, but effectively it's very related to the question and debate we had earlier in terms of upskilling the community as well, and if that means at certain points in that we can then step back from that, that's fine as long as the community is upskilled to do it, and how we can use some of our resource to do that. There's also across the community, and it's not increased, it's not in the down to the 16 million there, but we're also looking across the events portfolio to look at things like how we can be more commercial with the Air Festival and some other of the large events as well there. So I think you can see by the fact that we've been committed to Festival Coast Live and the amount of that is effectively community events. We've actually really made a real step change in terms of the amount of availability of funding and the value. I think it'd be fair to say we actually as an administration place on events and brightening up the place and allowing particularly the community to do that. So I hope that gives Councillor Hadley some assurance.
Your second question.
Well, just a response to that. I think there was quite a lot of one-off funding as part of COVID recovery for events that have been done for this year. I'm not sure that that's sustained into the future in terms of funding at the level that Coast Live pulled together a lot of existing events and also took in one-off funding. Can you just confirm I'm right that some of that or a significant part of that is not actually funded into the future?
That's why it's that's why it's so important that we through these fundings we've been putting in, we're then upskilling the community to make sure these events are long-term sustainable going forward. We have a real commitment across events. We have a real commitment across vibrant places. We're delivering that. We're investing in it. We will continue to invest in it into the future. How we do that, at certain points will be done in conversation with the community, in conversation with the arts sector, which yourself, Chairman, is a leader in. But no, we think it's really important that we long-term, facilitate how, as an enabling council, facilitate how the community can use our premises, can use our resources, and deliver a wide and varied programme of events going forward.
I suppose for transparency, I ought to mention I belong to the South West Arts Council. Sorry, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. My second question regards paragraph 12 and the reducing the costs of staffing, and a couple of things on that. I'm really quite concerned that we're raising the percentage of employee establishment not budgeted to 4%, and that seems to be embedding the pandemic levels of sickness and turnover as the norm. And I just wonder whether the head of paid service would like to comment on that in terms of, as we recover further, as we're trying to maintain services, is that a reasonable assumption that we are building in a very high level of turnover and sickness to enable that 4% underspend to occur? And the second element of that question is around, I don't see anything about limiting the spend on management consultancies or on the cost of our externalised functions, so things like BDC and Seascape and our wider family of endeavour.
Thanks, Chairman. With regard to the turnover allowance, actually, can I just confirm it doesn't reflect sickness because we pay for sickness, so sickness, it doesn't reflect sickness at all. It just reflects turnover rates, and it reflects the historical rate and our current experience, so post-COVID experiences at that level, and actually the historical figures were more at that level as well. So we have regularly recorded an underspend on salaries. What we're doing now is reflecting that in the budget.
Councillor Hadley, your third question.
Sorry, could I just have an answer on the management consultancy? Is that also constricted by the current? Currently?
So we've got a, Chair, if I may, we've got a commitment to, to no new expenditure, and it's signed off by Adam Richards and myself. So, I'm certainly not aware of any management consultancy, new management consultancy being endeavoured in the short term. But if anybody else is, they'll correct me.
Thank you, Chair. So my third question is really. I guess this was raised in a way earlier. There seems to be a disparity between what Mr. Richards is putting into the report and what the leader is saying. And it concerns the bit about the council tax increase, because paragraph 25 suggests, as the previous budget statement, that the assumptions within the MTFP are that we would take the full council tax increase. And the leader keeps referring to his low tax, small state stripped out services approach, where we're not doing that. And that's really regressive, because the users of a lot of our services are on limited income, and so people who are residents, perhaps with large incomes, are making a saving. Those who are dependent, particularly the elderly, on fixed incomes, are more hit by a squeeze on the general income and an increase in the fees and charges that we make for services that we provide. So the question, I suppose, is how does paragraph 20, is probably to the Chief Financial Officer, how does the MTFP assumptions about tax increases being at full rate square with the leader's assertion that he's not going to increase taxes and he's going to make the poor pay for the services that that they use?
Leader.
Quite a number, thank you, Chair. Quite a number of points in that. So, that's exactly why we've got a council tax policy we have in terms of providing the most efficient services we can, delivery of service, so that we can keep council tax low, exactly for the fact that it's important to keep money in people's pockets, especially the most vulnerable in the community. Councillor Hadley said my small state low tax stripped out services, which is absolute nonsense. Just look at our record. We have invested millions and millions and millions of pounds, record investment, in our administration in service delivery, because we weren't prepared to just effectively stop investment, and we've been able to deliver that while delivering low council tax in 2 years. We've already heard about that. I won't repeat it. So what's the policy going forward? So we've got a really clear, it has been clear, permanently in the MTFP, and this MTFP is built on the fact that we'll be taking the base rate and the adult social care surcharge at 1% going forward. If we're in a position at any point in the future, through strong financial management, this is why we're so passionate about retaining our assets to deliver long-term financial sustainability, then we look forward to bringing in continue with low tax going forward. That is a commitment of this administration. It is not to say anything other than what's in the budget at the moment, which is our expectation that tax will be at the rate, at the 2% rate going forward. If our position changes, then we've made quite clear that's where we would like to be, but not until we've delivered that extra money going into reserves that we're putting in, that investment in services, protecting our services going forward, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. That was your third question.
Yes, I'm sorry. I hadn't had an answer in terms of paragraph 25 explicitly says that the council tax, the assumption is that the council tax will increase at the full rate. So presumably that means that.
I said quite clearly that's the assumption it's based on, but it is exactly that, and that's our expectation in terms of what we would be delivering a budget in February. We know as an underpinning of our administration, we believe in low tax. If we materially improve the situation either this year or in ensuing years, we will be a party of low taxation. I'm glad also we're seeing that as nationally as well.
Thank you. Councillor Jude Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. I only have one question, and clearly you've listened to the debate tonight, and we're clearly all here for all residents across BCP, and we're all very much jointly and severally responsible, the people in the room, but all 76 councillors, to deliver, sound and effective services for our residents as council taxpayers and business ratepayers, as our residents and businesses are at the heart, must be at the heart of all we do. So bearing that in mind, as we are agreed that we're tacitly required by DULUC from this paper we've seen today to return to more traditional methods of funding the deficit gap, what real tangible engagement will be put in train ahead of pending possible inevitable service cuts and service cost rises? And this is clearly about those very people who we are here for, to ensure that we protect those who basically can't protect themselves, and we have something really tangible that the public understand, that we understand, and something we can deliver in light of these changes that we now need to make. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Leader.
Yeah, thank you, and I very much appreciate the question. I know how passionate you are about delivering engagement across BCP. A couple of points on there. So in terms of there are certain services, if we want to make cuts to them, we have to go through statutory consultation. My understanding, and again I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, is in terms of delivering down to the £16 million, so the £20 million of savings improvement we've done from the last budget, last MTFP paper, there are no services in that, so no reductions in service there will warrant any consultation. We now need to close the gap further. We've got some really positive, and I outlined them, earlier in terms of our work with health, the vacant post agencies, fees and charges, etc., which we expect to improve that situation. We're also going to conduct an exercise to see where other across the organisation we can actually look to sort of redistribute services. If any of those points, breach a point where we have to consult, we absolutely will. In terms of, but none of the savings trigger any statutory consultation to date. The other point I make is in terms of what we're trying to do is at pace really deliver. We're used to having gaps at this time of year, aren't we? Any one of us will know we have, and we've got to improve it towards February. We now need to improve it by October. So the current focus is on getting to a position that we think we can support, and then we're going to try and improve it. What we have got, because we're doing it so early in the cycle, is time to then reflect with our communities on some of the things we're doing. So once we get to a position that we're comfortable with, then at that point I think it'd be absolutely right and proper to work out how we engage with communities across the process between that point in October and February when we deliver the budget. We've made a commitment. We've got a lead member for engagement. We've made a commitment across engagement. We've really glad to look at that going forward and double down on it.
Thank you. Councillor Butler, are you satisfied?
Yes, thank you for that. We all in this room, and most councillors I'm sure will understand our statutory requirements and those which aren't statutory with regard to consultation, but the public perhaps don't. So that's really important that we ensure they understand what we should be doing on their behalf. And I look forward very much being part of this tangible consultation going forward between now and February. It's an extremely tight fit. So I will expect to be kept informed at all levels, and I thank you for your answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Phipps, beg your pardon.
Hello, yes, thank you very much. I've got two questions, Chairman. The first one is, it's been said in the report that there will be no new commitments to agency staff, but I just wanted to ask about consultants, because this council does seem to extensively use consultants. We are all aware of the KPMG Beach Huts consultancy for 120,000, and we've recently been made aware in the press about 195,000 used on consultants for the Barclays building. Both of these schemes, of course, didn't come to any fruition. There are presumably other consultants used all over the place. I'm sure there are, and I know there are, and some we don't even know about. For instance, just this coming Thursday, consultants are being used to do a visionary work or whatever about trees. I have no idea how much they're costing, but I just wanted to ask, are you still committed to continuing with paying what can be quite large sums to consultants when you're actually saying that there will be no new commitments to agency staff? That's my first question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you, Chair. I think it's just try and tease out a little bit of clarity, if I may, and apologise if I wasn't clear earlier. We will be maintaining a level of agency staff across the organisation. We're just going to effectively get a bit more demanding in terms of how we transact that and try and long term drive that down. There are certain parts of the organisation, particularly children's services, which would expect a retained period agency staff over a long period. So just hopefully that's clear enough. So it's not no new agency. We're just trying to reduce the levels of agency. In terms of your points around consultancy, and I relate that to extra spend that we haven't got budgeted for. Are we planning on doing anything of that? We've made it as far as putting a recommendation just to really underline the point in the last paper that no new spending can be put forward unless it's signed off by our Chief Financial Officer and myself as a portfolio for finance. So there is no plans to do any material consultancy work that I'm aware of. Obviously, an organisation of this size will use elements of consultancy, whether it's to do with trees, which I'm not aware of, Councillor Phipps, but I will look into at pace tomorrow morning, or not. But we will have the elements of consultancy, but no new material financial commitments until this budget is balanced.
Your next question, Councillor Phipps.
Okay, thank you. Right, my next question is basically a bit earlier on. I think I heard correctly that the leader committed to an increase in the Treasury limit. Now, I think this is the new terminology for actually the loan threshold, which is proposed and is going to come before full council. It would have come in September, but of course it couldn't, and it's going to come to next council to increase the loan threshold to 1.3 billion. Obviously, things have changed a little bit in that the Public Works Loan Board current interest rates have risen to around 5.3% per annum today, and they were only 3.9% per annum on 8th of September, and they're likely to rise further because that's the way things are going. So any justifications for raising the borrowing threshold or business cases for capital projects funded by borrowing is probably at the moment out of date. So are these plans going to be reassessed using revised interest rates? There's also rumours of the bank base rate hitting 6%. So I presume it's going to be difficult to estimate what the cost of borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board might rise to, but it's certainly going to be higher than it is now. So I wonder if you could actually comment on that. In the light also, if you said that, and I think I heard this right as well, that you were going to be acting responsibly for the finances of this council. So if you're still committed to increasing a loan threshold, I'd just like your comments on what I said. Thank you.
Councillor Miller.
Yeah, actually, really valid point, actually, isn't it? And it's something we have to reflect on consistently. Just one element of clarification earlier. If I indicated that I was going to, effectively make a decision in terms of increasing the threshold, absolutely not. It's a council decision, as Councillor Phipps went on to say. I will be presenting a paper that suggests that or I've been involved in a paper that suggests that's the right course of action. Why is that the right course of action? Because it gives us flexibility going forward. We've got a huge regeneration agenda, and we need to be, stay committed to that. One thing that hopefully will give you comfort and should give full council comfort is we've tightened up the detail around that when it talks about everything has to have a self-sustaining business case going forward. So we will, so effectively, regardless of what the rate is, that rate at the day will have to be the business case will have to be sufficient to cope with the rate at the day. So I think you're absolutely right. It will make challenging and viability on some things more difficult while we're in a high interest rate environment. But this council will only be able to commit to capital spend that has a solid business case that sits behind it.
Did you have any further questions, Councillor Phipps?
No, I didn't, but I am very pleased to hear that there will have to be a solid business case. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody that's contributed this evening. we were asked to scrutinise the paper, and I think in the last 2.5 hours we've certainly given it a good go. There are 5 recommendations that go to Cabinet on the paper, and I, at this point, would like to, if I may, close the meeting. So the meeting is closed at 8:27. Thank you.